So, as was indicated, Frank, we are going to start, but we'll not finish the reign of Charles I because there is just so much.
There is so much.
Yes. It's I would say about a quarter of the 17th century, 1625 to 1649. But a very, very important part, particularly for the Stuart monarchy and, of course, the future of England and Scotland. Charles I is remembered in a variety of ways, and we're going to consider some of them here. But we start with the tree. You know how I feel about trees, and this is deceptively simple. This is to lure you into
more trees.
Yeah. This is just get you hooked. And then you say, I want more. Yeah. Because you say, God, that seems so simple. I know. Because Charles I, and you recall, he had a brother, and he had the late brother, Henry, and then he had a sister. We'll get into that later. And you realize there had been a plan. Well, he and Villiers had gone to Spain to try to get him married off to a Spanish princess, but that didn't work out. So he ended up in marrying Henrietta Maria, as she was known. And you think, shouldn't we know more about Henrietta Maria? I say you should. See how I take off my glasses when I get excited. Because when you go to Versailles, you'll be expected to know all this. So I'm trying to help you in getting you ready, because Henrietta Maria was the sister of Louis XIII. In other words, she was the aunt of Louis XIV. Now, how titillating is that? So, when you go in and talk to your fellow tourists and you say, did you know this? And you could just beat that breast and show off. I mean, because, see, I mean, all the advantages of climbing in the trees and getting all this knowledge, but that then leads to their 4 children. And just to note this, because we're going to go over all of this again, they had this, you see, the daughter Mary, and she will marry a Dutchman, as you see, William of Orange. So, you know, England, Holland. And then, of course, Minette, who's going to be married to a French duke. Isn't that a nice? And Henrietta, really, she was always known as Minette. And then, of course, James II, who's married to Anne Hyde and has 2 daughters. All of this, previews of coming attractions. Yeah. This goes on throughout April. Yeah. So, yeah. So that, yeah, this is just to get you excited. Now, the following will make you think this is an art history class, because King Charles spent a lot of money, because this is Nolan Mills, folks. This is some serious artistry. And much of this, which you'll see in London when you on your trips, or you can probably just see it by computer nowadays. All of this from the National Gallery and the National Portrait Gallery is done either by Van Dyck or Rubens, or, you know, basically the who's who of art history from this period. And you say, gosh, would that have been expensive? I think so. I mean, again, this is not, you have you heard of Sears? That was a store that used to have Olin Mills. Those were discount places.
My grandfather worked for Olin Mills.
Okay, so you understand that was economical. This is not. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're not comparing, that you understand that when you're King Charles and you are getting your family, I mean, it's some people don't like it, but I do. And they have the two elder children. Children are so cute, aren't they? It's a shame, but but that first year is really cute. So anyway, they're first two of the children, and of course, with their happily married parents. Isn't that always nice to hear? Unfortunately, despite the wonderful joys of parenthood and marital bliss, this was not a happy time. Charles should not have been king. He wouldn't have been if the older brother hadn't died, but that's the way it goes. He did it, but he was definitely, it's like he meant well, but he just could not carry it out. He was in many ways a victim of a system that required him to have great ability and the ability to work with people and get along, and he couldn't. He had one way, and that was the right way. So this went on for many, many years until, of course, his death in 1649. The result, as we will see, is rather constantly during these years, conflict by what would be called continual efforts to rule by monarchy and the efforts of those in Parliament to essentially create a power sharing. Henrietta Maria, the Queen, probably didn't help his cause. I guess she had to take some English 101 classes. And also, she was a papist. Yeah, a card-carrying Catholic. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She probably had a rosary. Oh, yeah. That's politics, though. They got married. And do you ever say, oh, honey, I wish you weren't going to hell? But he was a very devout Anglican, and she was just as serious as Catholic. There were rumors, which I don't believe, but there were rumors that she actually would let her dogs run through the Anglican church her husband was at because, they weren't going to church together. Wouldn't that be all? Bye, honey, have a good time at your pagan temple where you and other people are going to burn, that sort of thing. That hurts. It wasn't like, oh, give peace a chance, love. No. But they got along very well. I mean, as long as the children were going to be Church of England. You betcha. As long as he was their father. That's the way it worked. But she had been allowed to bring her priests and entourage as long as they keep it private. because you're not allowed to go around publicly with your Pope business or rosaries, any of that, because our people don't. Mm-mm. So you all keep it to yourselves, because you can be trouble. But then we think, and she was the total package, as well as being the ideal wife, as far as that goes. But very French, but there's nothing wrong with that. We're all into Anglo-French, right? I mean, that's very nice. Unfortunately, I suppose when they were having pillow talk, at night, she'd say, "Oh, honey, you're a king, and God loves you so much, and you're number two right under God." And he was, "I know, hon. Thanks for knowing that." It's like ideal companion. And you say, so that's the daughter of Henry IV. Should we be excited about that? You are very right. You should be. Why are you excited about it, you ask? He was originally a Huguenot. I know. Talk about a conversation starter. He was a Huguenot, but when he became king, he was the first Bourbon king. Valois ran out. So now we have a new dynasty. But when he became king, we have a Huguenot king of France. Oh, yuck. And he was reputed to have said, I don't believe it, but he was reputed to have said Paris is well worth a mass. In other words, I'll convert, I'll go through confirmation. And you say, should you do that? Isn't that a little hypocritical? Well, yeah, but politics being such as it is, you got to fill in the blanks the right way. You can't put NA or anything like that. You gotta say MRC, and I'm proud of it. Roman Catholic. So all of this then is to say that she was probably used to some religious flexibility. If you think of her own father, I just thought that was rather interesting when you think about what traditions, because it had to be hard, because it's not as if she was allowed to go out and say, I want to start a Catholic church, or I want to talk to some other Catholics, and maybe we can all get together somewhere else in London, since you took over all our churches and so forth. Because, I mean, he is, after all, defender of the faith. Remember that? Of course you do. The title given, remember, to King Henry VIII. Go back to your notes and you'll see it there. Now for the equestrian shots. Again, all of these paintings, we just can't get enough. And we think about that in terms of what was being called at this time, even more so by his cousin Louis, we call him. But you say Louis XIV. The idea of divine rights, and that means God and me, because my power comes from above, not below, not you regular folks. You are answerable to me, and I am your servant in a way, but only in a way. Otherwise, God and me will take good care of you. So you be real good. And otherwise, fermez la bouche. Shut your mouth. Yeah. Except saying, thank you, may I kiss your foot. That's the sort of thing, divine rights. And Parliament was getting, what's a good word for it? Kind of like, what about us? We represent the people you rule. And you say, oh, wow, is this democracy? I think not. Because in addition to nobility, we are talking about people of great wealth. And they simply had reached a point by the 17th century that they thought our time has come. I mean, we're paying for all this, so you ought to give us a little power here. And the king says, but it's God and me, not you. You are here to do what you're told. And so the king said, then I'm just tired of arguing. So leave. I'll find another way of getting revenue. And he somehow managed for about 11 years. It wasn't easy, because remember, Parliament could vote in various revenues. And as we will see, the reason that this ended is he reached a financial point that he had to call another parliament. And of course, when you come back after 11 years, you're not like, gosh, we missed you. We love you so much. No, they say, you want something? They get real sassy, and say, how bad do you want it? Yeah, I mean, that's pretty sassy to talk to a king like that. And of course, how do you like that? Another, I just couldn't resist. And you think, gosh, he must have really been fond of himself. It seems like there are a lot of these, but it's good for the people. I'm doing it. God told me in a dream that I should get lots and lots. But that's the way he appeared. And of course, the style of the day, the goatees and the hair and the various kinds of pieces of apparel that he wore. And again, that's in the National Gallery. I brought this one back because I thought you'd see a little dog. Yeah. Because it may well have been, you remember Benny? You remember Benny, Judy's dog? That could be one of his ancestors. Yeah. Because these King Charles dogs, they used to be hunting dogs, apparently, before, but now, I mean, they like to have, they just sit there and get comfortable and think they're humans. But the idea is how often you see them in royal portraiture, and probably noble as well. I mean, you don't have to be a vet to realize the significance of the dogs, but it's so funny to me about how these King Charles, once they got into this whole domesticity, I'm thinking a Stuart dog like that wouldn't be expected to go out and hunt and look after sheep or any of. You wouldn't have any responsibilities. Let's put it that way. You would be like one of the children. But again, it's interesting to see the role that these animals played. And that's, of course, why I guess the appellation King Charles was put on them. And they are cute, and no one can deny that. And they're really, well, I don't know anything about it, but I mean, it's like I'm hardly authorized to speak about dog breeds, but it's definitely sure. I mean, I guess there's still ones that want to get out there and work hard and help look after the wool producers and all of that. But the ones I knew prefer the life of comfort and ease. So just saying. I guess it all depends on who you are. Now, here is someone interesting. Marnie, you will know him as Archbishop William Law. One tough cookie. Because Charles was somewhat timid. But when he chose an Archbishop of Canterbury, he chose someone who was, to use the cliche, tough as nails. Laud was, he had been under James, a bishop. I mean, he hadn't done badly. But to be Archbishop of Canterbury, it's number one. And that was Charles' first decision. Laud was the kind of individual, my way or the highway. And in this particular time, there's only one church, remember? Because people who are of a different faith generally do it in the closet. Okay? It's not like appreciate you respecting our way. Our way is different. And they say, oh, well, that's okay. Let's all get together for Thanksgiving. No. You just stay in the closet. So the idea is, as far as Laud was concerned, the Anglican way was the one way. And the problem is that he was an activist about it, meaning that one has the idea that under James, maybe, and certainly Elizabeth, there was a tendency to overlook people who did things differently. And that means, for example, if your usage of the prayer book or your particular way of carrying out the services in the Church of England was deviant, you followed a slightly different way, then you wouldn't say like, hey man, that's fine, I'm easy. No. But it does mean that despite certain expectations, you have bishops, you follow rituals, you can be flexible. This is not a flexible approach. Laud had a policy that came to be known as thorough. And thorough means by the book. And if I catch you doing it a different way, it's a bad language, they may be held to pay. Yeah. You're going to get it. Spare the rod, spoil the child. He had I don't know what to call it, ambassadors or inspectors, agents, who would go to different churches disguised as a mild-mannered churchgoer and watch to see if they followed the prayer book. Or what if they said, let's just skip the prayer book. I'm just going to preach. And maybe I have a Bible reading for you. Furiously, you would see that agent taking notes. And you know where that minister is going? Going to a come to Jesus meeting. Yeah. Because he's going to catch HEW. Or worse. The idea is then that Laud became very serious about enforcing the regulations. Because a lot of these people are what we call Puritans. Puritans are sort of like, I would not touch. He said Puritan. Yeah, that's right. Puritans are puritanical. But that means, of course, we don't like your bishops. We don't like your prayer books. It's all this Catholic mess. Yes, you don't have rosaries. Yes, you don't have Mary statues. But you still have enough of this papal mess that we don't like. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but we're going to bring this to an end. So all of this will be, of course, a subject of great dispute, so much so that many Puritans, as we know, went to the Netherlands, went to America, where they could impose their own ideas of intolerance. Yeah. Because I mean, it's our way. It's like everybody would say, now that we're here, we can pursue the correct way, our way. So, again, quite a lesson, isn't it? And believe me, they didn't want to stay in Lodi in England because they would punish them with all kinds of terrible things, branding them. Yeah, and branding. I've never been branded, but I imagine.
It's painful.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say,
Unpleasant.
just the idea of being branded doesn't sound comfy. Yeah, so I'll have to ask my dermatologist sometime. But when he messes with the Scots, Laud really catches it, because what Laud tries to do, and remember, the King of England is also the King of Scotland. Sometimes we forget that because, I'm assuming that Charles, as opposed to his father, did not have what my parents used to call the Scottish brogue. I don't know why they always called it the brogue, but yeah, I never heard that word brogue except referring to the Scots. But the idea then being that he sent his agents into Scotland to mess with those Scottish people and say, you know what you got to do? I'm going to pass out some prayer books and I want to see them used. And then you think about that and think about the Scots are going to go like, oh, well, thank you for your help. We just want to get along. We heart you, the church. It's like, and you think about it, that doesn't sound like the English and Scots that I know. And you are very right. This was a serious miscalculation. And especially for Charles, because Charles already had the Parliament furious because he was not, well, he basically ignored them. There was no Parliament during those years. And now the Scots were so irritated, it appears that such as it was, because the King of Scotland was obviously in London at this point. But they sent an army to basically, shall we say, protest. So this force is sort of like saying to the English Parliament, we feel your pain, and we know that you're hurting, and we're hurting. Maybe there's something here that can create love between us. It's very interesting that. But now we meet Wentworth, the Earl of Stratford. He's an interesting fellow because he changed sides. Yeah, he had been very much part of the parliamentary rights group, and suddenly, well, not suddenly, but gradually he decided people associated with the cause of Parliament had gone too far. And so he basically became one of the king's men. And during that period between 1629 and 1640, and notice under his name, you'll see Hibernia. Yeah. And basically it means the proconsul of Ireland. And you say, oh, he was an Irish lover. Not so much. He wanted to hurt them and make them behave. And they reciprocated with about the same amount of love. So, Ireland and the English, another story. Yes. So, anyway, Wentworth was very useful to the royal government. And so during the years that Parliament was not meeting, Wentworth would, in essence, given the title Earl of Stratford, not bad, would be given the ranking of the king's chief minister. And what he would do, and remember, we need money. We don't have Parliament to allocate money. So how are we going to get it? Extortion. It's like, you've heard of governments. I've never had a tax I didn't like. That's basically the policy of the royal government. If you had not accepted a titleship, like being a Sir this and Sir that, it's nice, Lennon, didn't they all get them? Ringo and everybody, all of those Beatles. Yeah, and did Mick Jagger get it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Now, it's not free. I don't want to shock or hurt you by saying that there will be a handling charge. Everything, there's nothing for free in this world. I don't need to be ugly, but that's just. And if you find out, you say, well, I don't want it. I just enjoy being me, just, regular, ordinary person. Well, you're going to take it. Okay, yeah. You will join. You will be part of the group. And there will be an initiation fee. That's the truth. I'm not lying. They really made people who were eligible be knighted because it was a wonderful source of revenue. And then they had what was called a naval attack fee. And it was normally paid by people who lived along the coast, which was a lot of English people. But now people in the inland were told, who knows who could come by ship, and they'll eventually reach you. So they had to start paying the tax. And basically the whole taxes were a way for the king to avoid having to call parliament. I say he lasted 11 years. I imagine some of those bills, though, were getting overdue. Because you can imagine that. Think about your art bill. I mean, with all those paintings, like I say, it's not Citizen Robot. This is some serious, this is all very fancy schmancy. So everybody is saying, so what are you going to do about it? And the answer is face the inevitable, which is calling Parliament, Lords and Commons. And Commons consisting, as you noted up there, the gentry, who are not very common, I might add, because gentry are, I always see them, you know, with the pipe and all of the English attire and saying, I say, old chap. And then, and the wife can strut around and say, I'm lady so and so, you know, that. These are not peasants. They are farmers only in the way they have lots of land. And people, not them, work those lands. So the gentry then are very much in control of the House of Commons, which hasn't met since 1629. And now they're coming back. And they've got a lot to say. And none of it is like, we miss you, we love you so much. You know. Now, some hurtful things may have been said. But basically, it will become, as of 1640, a comeback for Parliament. Because remember, the king is the one who decided whether it meets or not. It's like they can't meet unless he says so. And he lasted all those years. And boy, there will be HELL to pay when they do come back. Wentworth, as well as Law, will end up checking in to you know where. Everybody's favorite tower.
Yeah, that's fine.
And you got, and they think, but we were just trying to look after the king and the royal government, and yeah, you'll pay. So the idea is that many of these people in Parliament are Puritans, and boy, they are vexed, irritated. How many other synonyms can I think of? But you get the idea. They don't like the way the church is going. No more prayer book, you know, all that. So it's very, very unpleasant. So you can only imagine King Charles was not in a good position at all now. Very bad position. So we got the Scots, and they don't want to go home. They got armies there. They were in northern England. That would be a very, very unpleasant situation. And then, of course, Lord Wentworth ended up in the Tower. You say it's good to be king sometimes, but this is not one of those. The very bad time. Because this long parliament, as they call it in history, because it met, you see 1640 to 1660, that's amazing, 20 years for one parliament. But during all those years, heads would be rolling. And many people would die in battle. All of this because of a basic conflict. The king was in charge versus the king and the parliament. Because parliaments go way back in history. You know, we talked in another course, we talked about it in terms of the 14th century, when it was sort of a branch of the king. But, you know, we've come a long way, as they say. And it was very hard in this age of divine rights monarchy. It might work for Louis XIV across the border, but not so much for Charles. Because I think the difference is that the English Parliament was much more mature than similar French bodies. The Civil War then, which begins, and some people speak of two civil wars, but our concern will be just to see this between 1640 and 1649, is to appreciate that, you know, Frank told us about the Battle of Naseby, and I was reading about how much you want to get involved in the Naseby community. I mean, military people, reenactments.
Oh, yeah.
You'd be amazed about, you know, we think about how horrible battles are in war and killing and all that. But it's a big to do, yes. And Naseby's a little old village. Beulah, Beauregard, yeah. I mean, very small, but that was a major battle. And it was a battle, of course, won by the forces of Parliament. Needless to say, scholars of this period have studied and decided who was on which side, and of course, it's very hard to say everybody, you know, it's like history is not a science. But generally speaking, if you were rural, sort of you like the way we did it in the past, you tended to support the king. If you were more with it and hip and saying, yeah, down with the prayer book. yeah, let's go. Not that I'm thinking they're the most tolerant folks either, but that's not the point. They tend to be, I hate to say progressive, but let's just say they come at this from a different point of view. Parliament, yay, go big pig, you know, that kind of thing. And more or less, you'll notice, I spoke of the middle class, they always do this, because they always hear you throwing, if you're ever doing a test, oh, think of the blue books that many of us used in school. Yeah, remember the blue books? Yeah. Because you would always think of the rising middle class, and you throw that in one of your answers, because in some time they would always be rising or falling. So you throw it in. I know it's like betting or some vice. I mean, you take a chance. The odds, you know, they're either rising or falling, that middle class. But seriously, the gentry I guess all of these groups feel that Parliament will give them a greater opportunity at success, whereas the more traditional classes tend to support the monarchy because that's the way it's been. Now, you notice I mentioned Presbyterians and independents. All of these folks, you bring up the name of John Calvin and they go, oh, my heart beats. Yeah, so fast. God, I love him. So we can all love Calvin. And if you really want to be happy, you can get the multi-volume Institutes of the Christian Religion. I know. I thought you'd ask. You can go as my special guest to the Auburn University Library, and they are there. And you just tell them I sent you. And you can take them home. And for those quiet evenings, very quiet, and no phones, and no getting in a lazy boy, because you'll be tempted into wickedness and sloth. Yes, because it can be some heavy reading, and none of those yellow and black things either. So, yeah, the institutes. So the independents basically are saying, and this will be scary. Back then, there should be no Church of England. We just go whatever church, whatever I know, pretty scary. Then there's the Presbyterians, and just like the modern sect. I mean, it's like they said there will be a established church. There'll be a Church of England, but it won't be with that blankety blank Book of Common Prayer, because you people are going to HEWs, and there won't be any more of those yucky bishops, because we're Presbyterian. We love Calvin and we're proud. Yeah. So that you say, is that big difference? Yeah, real big. So a lot of people may be fighting to read those institutes, but I think when you drop my name, you'll get priority getting to read that. I don't think you don't have to fight off masses of people who want Calvinist theology books. Okay, I'm just saying. But basically, these kinds of conflicts are part, as silly as it may seem to us in the modern day, of this civil war. And of course, the monarch was not strong, and he had just followed Laud and Stafford. Now he was stuck. By the by, I thought this particular fellow was interesting. This is the nephew of King Charles I, and you say, Rupert of the Rhine. How did he get there? Gosh, I thought you'd never ask. His mother was, I know, this is going to be exciting,
Elizabeth
was actually James' sister, James' daughter, Charles' sister. And as a result, his father, the Winter King, was rearing his family, his children, in The Hague. Remember that? He had been the king of Bohemia.
very shortly.
And now Rupert decided Uncle Charlie's having troubles. And, it's such fun, holidays. And maybe I should go over there and help. So Rupert will become a major figure. I'm being silly, but seriously, he becomes a major figure in these civil wars because he will help lead the Royalist forces. In fact, he will become important in a variety of ways. He will be involved in Canada. He'll be involved in various kinds of experiments in a number of fields. So Rupert was able to survive, which is no easy thing to do during the wars, because he led what's called the Royalist forces. And guess where they were headquartered? Oxford, yeah. Because, not surprising to me, the forces of Parliament had London. Because even then, London tended to be more, should we say, cosmopolitan or sophisticated. So Parliament was able to take control there. Now, there's not a lot of distance, as many of you know, between Oxford and London, but back in that day, I guess there was enough. And meanwhile, Rupert, after these civil wars, ended up laying claim to this area in Canada. And I think it's very interesting because a lot of us don't realize you know Quebec. Now, this is an 18th century map, so don't rush to Canada and say, the Ollie instructor said, no, it's not there again, but they'll be impressed. Our friends in Canada that you know so much. But Quebec, see Detroit down there in Quebec. So you say, well, I don't think the last time I looked is where it was in Michigan, not Quebec. But yeah, maps have changed, haven't they? So in any event, you go up there, you see Hudson Bay Company. And again, these are what we finally like to call developments, commercial enterprises, startups, whatever. But anyway, it is part of the British Empire as it will develop during the Stuart time. And I just thought that was kind of interesting to think about Rupert, because he could have been killed very easily during the wars of Uncle Charlie. Yeah, I mean, he had, I guess, really good insurance or something, because he did very, very well in surviving the wars, because he was the major military figure.
He was cavalry commander.
And then a lot of this was going on during the reign of his cousin Charles II. Now, this individual has been compared to Robespierre. This attorney, Robespierre was a lawyer, and someone who is, did I use the word without prejudice, fanatic? I know what's right. Meaning, if you think that I'm wrong, you're wrong. You are seriously wrong. And it's not not like that.
No.
No. You need serious correction. Okay?
What relationship is he to Thomas
Oh,
Cromwell?
they're
or
distant
Wolfgang?
cousins. I was interested in that myself.
I'm trying
Distant
to figure it out,
cousins.
and I can't.
No, I mean, Cromwell is a fairly common English name, but they were related, but, you know, not. Maybe at a reunion, you know, you're there with all the other Cromwells, but I always thought that was very interesting. He came, you know, he's an independent, but see, and he probably read his Calvin books too. So you'll be in good company. He was, you know, he starts out there like, I'm just a member of House of Commons and all these important people, and I'm just a country lawyer. And then people start listening to him and saying, wow, Oliver, it seems like God is speaking through you. And he'll say, of course, oh, shucks. You know, as any of us would say with great humility, do you really think so? Then he starts thinking, I think Brother Calvin said in his teachings that the righteous will be rewarded and elected. And so, and then you start looking at yourself and you're saying, you know, maybe in the morning you go and say, maybe that means I should take charge. Because, you know, he doesn't have a lot of problem with, you know, am I really the great man that I would like to be, you know? And now you're saying, yes, I am, you know. So I think he had a great assurance. He was a leader of the army, and he was definitely anti-royalist. With a lot of charisma and a serious religious belief, he came to be a leader of the parliamentary forces. And as we all know, a very significant one. I think there is a statue of Cromwell at the House of Parliament because of his role there. The battle that Frank mentioned, the Battle of Naseby, will in fact be one of the great successes, which his forces, the New Model Army, which, as the name suggests, was a different sort of thing because rank was given on the basis of ability rather than status. You know, it's like people would hate to hear, you know who I am? My father is the Earl of this, the Duke of that, therefore I should be a general. The New Model Army was based on ability, the idea of people who had it. And boy, I'm sure when you got to the religion box, you had to be, I believe in Calvin. I love Calvin. See? And once you read the Institutes of the Christian Religion, and let me know when you finish. I know, well, I'm patient, but yeah. And you just write an essay on each volume about election and all that it means. Who is saved, who is damned. But basically, he was a very, very serious Calvinist. And I suppose the people who participated, these Calvinists, including Cromwell at Naseby, it was a disaster. Oh, the king wasn't captured, but they
Good
captured, yeah, and it was humiliating when you think about, gosh, you think Charles after the battle was saying, gosh, this won't look good in history, and that sort of thing. That I'm a loser, but yeah. Thank Edward II. I mean, there have been other kings who've been embarrassed, but this is a very embarrassing position for a king to be in. Naseby, and again, you can go there. It's sort of in central England, I would call it. There's the map. You see red there. You can see that where it is. So it looks like it's not far from Leicester. I mean, there are places around it. And of course, I don't want to offend anybody as friends in the Chamber of Commerce, but I'm thinking they're still getting a lot out of this battle. I mean, you think of the people in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Don't you think they do a big business from the battle? T-shirts, mugs, etc. And so if we can do it for our Civil War, I guess they can do it for theirs. And I find it fascinating. There is so much interest in these various occasions. And Naseby is a perfect example of that fact. So, the king's forces have been humiliated. I believe I mentioned that all of his supplies, everything else was taken. So, and the Scots, they're hanging in. I guess they were living on pillaging and the rest, if you think about that. So meanwhile, Sir Thomas, who helped lead the military force, definitely, along with Brother Cromwell, because he's not your majesty or anything else. We think we're carrying out God's will. And you'll know that more after you read Calvin's works. Instead of that Pope lover. But the king is an Anglican, I know, but he's married to Pope. So guilt by association, right? Yeah. So all of that will show you, and look at this. I thought this was interesting from the printing press, how often it is. We didn't have this back in my day. This is so, 17th century is much more modern. And that is composed for the Parliament's army, qualifications of our soldiers. So, I mean, of course, we don't take this every time, Dick and Harry, but you have to be. And what if you said, man, I'm not into that religion, but I'm really good. I work out every day. I really want to go fight and all that. No. You got to pass some religious tests. Yeah. So, no. And if you have any rosaries, you don't need to apply. There's no position for you. You've got to be one of God's people, not Satan's. That's pretty strict. You say, but I'm an Episcopalian. I want to bring my Book of Common Prayer. You're going to hell, sir. So, yeah, it's not like, but if you are fit and you have the right religion, meaning you're Calvinist, independent, Presbyterian, come on in. and you can fight against Satan and his friends.
It's got the scriptural references there on that.
Amen, sister. Yeah, that's it. It's always got that scripture. You see that right there. Good boy, howdy.
Samuel and Deuteronomy.
They did some Bible. I mean, it's not like any quickie mess. No. Mm-mm. They're gonna read you the Bible, and we're gonna do it seriously. And you don't say, oh, well, the other church is gonna go get to the restroom before we do. As they used to worry about in our small town. It's like, oh, God, it's 12 o'clock. We got to get to the restaurant. No. You will stay and you will listen. My students who would say, oh, we don't do the Old Testament. I said, what kind of religion? I mean, with that. But anyway, yes, they definitely quoted Samuel and Deuteronomy. Yeah. And you expected to study all this. And guess what? It was probably the King James Version by this particular period. I don't know if King James would have appreciated this group abusing his son like that, but yeah, that definitely is that, because if you are familiar with the Old Testament, there's a lot about fighting and about, it's not like, oh, can't we just all love each other? I mean, there's some people, yeah, exactly. There's not, pacifism is not encouraged if you read many of the books of the Bible. In any event, this notes the cause of God and his people. And who are his people? Us. And who are God's enemies?
Yeah.
Charles the First.
Yeah.
And those wretched people like that queen. She's bad. That French hussy, you know, that sort of thing. That's the way it is sometimes. So he is captured. Now remember, by the point that he is captured, you know, I often wonder, what was his capture like? Surely he had servants with him or somebody. He didn't just sit there and sell like regular people. But I'm sure he knew that the end was coming. Henrietta Maria took the children and they went to France. Yes.
Get out of Dodge.
Because it was definitely not, I mean, I'm sure it was a great hope that we'll all be back. Daddy will take care of us. We miss you, Daddy, and all that. But he was there, and they had decided, Cromwell, Fairfax, and all the rest, that he needed to be brought to justice. Notice he's called Charles Stewart. Have you recently heard about another royal who's referred to by regular names? Yes. So that's hurtful, isn't it? I mean, you're a king. I mean, many of you probably fancy yourselves kings. So if somebody addressed you this way, you would probably not like it. Yeah, that's what they would do in France in 1792. They would call him Citizen Capet. Louis XVI to you. I guess this is a way of saying you're just a regular guy. You just think you're high and mighty. Anyway, they got him all fixed up and he's has to appear before Parliament. I don't think he had a choice, sir. Would you like to? You know, it's like, we would love to visit with you. catch up on old times. No, I think this is more or less, oh God, it could be like the People's Court, the people versus, that was an old television show. The people versus Charles Stewart. And you're going like, is that right? Well, some people will say it's perverted. It's just wrong. How dare they do that? Because who are they to judge a king? You know, they could go to hell. The whole lot of them. Even worse than that, though. What if we do something to him? What are we going to do about it? Are we going to give him, what do they call it? You'll have to do hard time. Isn't that what they call it? Well, I'd rather do soft time. Maybe you do crosswords or maybe watch HBO time.
Like
You know,
good time.
something. Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, just pass the time and say, how much longer, fellas, do I have to say here? But basically, I think they knew it just like the French did in 1792, 1783. If we don't, there's going to be trouble. You know, it's like as long as he's breathing, there are going to be people out there and say, we want you back. We want you back. We love you. The same thing happened with Richard II until they were sure he was starved to death. That you just, there'll always be this, let's bring back, we heart Richard, that sort of thing. So basically, we will have then the decision, and he will, if you believe these, so it's hard to read, isn't it? But I enjoyed the words, which basically are supposed to be what Charles has said, if you want to believe the source. In response, because it's sort of like j'accuse, it's like, you know, I mean, all these people in Parliament are talking to the king, just like we bring the prisoner forth, and you are accused of this, that, and the other. And, you know, that's kind of rude, isn't it? I mean, it's not like a parking ticket or something. I mean, it's like, and he's saying, like, how can you do this? You don't have the authority. God and I are in control. So you don't have these rights. And so, and notice, remember, I'm your king. Your lawful king, and what sins you bring upon your head, and the judgment of God upon this land. Think well upon it. Well, apparently they did because he didn't impress them. Maybe it was his lack of oratorical skills or whatever. But you get the idea. He didn't like get down and say, gosh, I'm sorry, fellas. I love you so much. And I made some boo-boos. And now, can we just all be friends? Can I have a hug? You know, that I don't see that as any part of this. And so, with his own attitude, there is no doubt where this is going. And it won't be any hard time. In fact, there'll be no time. Because he's out of here. All of this brought about by the fact that he doesn't deny the power of Parliament, but he says it is being misused, distorted, and God is going to be irritated, vexed,
Yeah.
not happy at all. So, what happens? He's found guilty as charged. And of course, those terrible events didn't get them. Of January 30th, 1649.
Should have one. Should have one spot.
Okay, I'll try it
What were the
again.
charges?
Wrong time.
There it is. The charges are that you have basically violated your coronation oath. I mean, the same things that were done to James and Charles. Now, as far as the execution, you see the head. And before the guillotine, we're so glad for the Industrial Revolution. But they were still executing with the instruments, with the axe. And you will notice, you can't see it clearly here, but you look at it closer, that there will be people, probably children, who are collecting blood spatter. And this is not for forensic files or some other serious. I think this is more of an eBay kind of thing. You know, it's like, wow. Because you believe in
Get your
royal blood.
salvation here.
Mhm.
Get your salvation here. Get your
Shit, I
salvation
mean,
here.
royal blood. I mean, get your royal blood. Get your. I mean, can you imagine?
Marketable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really disgusting if you think about it. But I always say if we go back to public executions, it would be quite popular, I suspect. But the idea, I know. Well, it's not going to happen. I'm just saying. But
I don't
If you
know.
volunteer,
the, I'm sorry.
No.
if you volunteer, say.
Oh, no. The idea being that the king is no more. And now England as well as Scotland will be ruled by what? God's will. And who knows God's will? Well,
Cromwell.
people who follow the teachings of one John Calvin. And we understand, of course, that they may be Presbyterians or they may be independents, but they will not be Rosary people, nor Church of England, nor any other people who are deviants of one sort or another. But the true people are the only people who are going to be in charge, God's people, who like to read, abridged or not, the Institutes of the Christian Religion. I've mentioned that 3 times to get you even more excited. Maybe you could just write a condensed report and you could do a presentation. I think we'll all be impressed. The idea, though, seriously, is that of Charles, I think the quotation by his own archbishop who spoke of him as saying, a mild and gracious prince, and you know, Dan, that's Dan with faint praise is coming.
That's right.
Who knew not how to be or how to be made great. And that's a position he'd been thrust in by the death of his brother Henry. And there was really no way out of it. So the tragedy which ended the 30th of January, 1649, which, as I was saying to Marnie as we were walking in, is celebrated in some English churches as the day of Charles, King and Martyr, he's called. Not Catholic, but just Church of England. Or, Marnie, you familiar with the Anglican Church in the United
Yes, I
States?
think it's more, it'd be more prevalent there.
Well, in the United States, but I mean, in the British too. More of what we call in Laudian terms the high church. But the high church puts more emphasis on ritual because Laud was quite in favor of the high church, meaning the more ritual, the better. Lots and lots of services. And even something so shocking, but I don't want to shock you, but basically the Pope, that devil in Rome, he snuck a note to Laud. It's one of these sort of like, I think we could get close. I know, aren't you amazed? I know you're shocked. What would the Pope say to Laud? I think you would be wonderful. I've heard a lot about you. All good. How would you like to have a red cap to wear? You mean, yes, I want you to be a cardinal. There was an old song called I Think I Love You. You may never have heard that, but yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a true story that the Pope actually invited him. You could be a cardinal. And that would be a great honor, wouldn't it? I think the Laud was not too interested though, because the high church, that particular position, I don't think that would have gone over too well. But as far as that was concerned, Laud was dead, and I think it was 1645 for the king was dead. Stafford was also executed, all of these people, because now we got the new regime. And it's going to be kingless. No more kings. And it's going to all be according to God's will. So bring out your Bibles, because Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, we know them well. So, or if we don't, we can study them. Oh, in addition to Calvin's greatest hits, yes. So, it is a new world, and we will start there next time. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.